Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unraveling Politics, a weekly political analysis show. The last 2 weeks we've been covering election results, so things have changed quite a bit nationally, and we'll get right into that today. So, President Trump has often reported that groceries are 25% cheaper. This is a claim that he's been making over the last 2 to 3 weeks. And I'm going to explain that that is not true. He is also saying that the country has had, quote, almost no inflation, unquote, which is also not true, as I will explain in a little bit. So where did this claim come from? Well, believe it or not, it did not come out of thin air completely. It sort of did, but not completely. Walmart released a 2025 Thanksgiving basket, and the sticker price is 25% less than what it was last year. That is true. However, there's a catch. There are fewer items in the basket. Instead of 29 items like there was last year, there are 23 items, and many of these items were switched out to a generic brand, which explains the price gap. On Truth Social, he wrote on November 6th, 2025 Thanksgiving dinner under Trump is 25% lower than 2024 Thanksgiving dinner under Biden, according to Walmart. My costs are lower than the Democrats on everything, especially oil and gas. So the Democrats' affordability issue is dead. Stop lying. Now, this came on November 6th. This was 2 days after the election, and we talked about the election results. And in the last episode, if you're interested, so check that out if you want to know. And basically, the short version is Democrats performed very well. In fact, they performed better than expected. So clearly, this is a lie, and inflation is about 3% at the moment. And while Trump, and frankly, so do I, love to blame Biden, last I checked, Biden is no longer deciding government policy. I think in general, voters look forward, not backward. They want to see solutions to the problems of today, not last year. And by the way, gas prices are about the same as they were last year, so gas and energy is not cheaper. It was cheaper most of the year, but not right now. What is confusing, I think, is Trump is following the same strategy as Joe Biden, which obviously didn't work out for Biden. Biden tried gaslighting Americans into telling us that the prices were actually cheaper, inflation was down, and the economy was doing really well. Trump is doing the exact same thing. If I were president, I would be telling people things are not so great, they're going to get worse, but I'm cleaning up the mess that Joe Biden left, and if Kamala Harris had won, it would actually be even worse. And that things are going to get better in the distant future. Trump is not doing that. Instead, he's telling people things are actually good right now. I'd also love for Trump to point out a policy of his that he implemented that has actually lowered prices. There's very little he could point to other than weakening the global economy to send oil prices lower. And speaking of oil prices, it's only a few dollars more than what it was back in 2019, not adjusted for inflation. It's basically the same, and oil prices were actually higher in 2018. The reason gas prices are higher is because we have fewer oil refineries to turn that oil into gasoline, but because of climate change and there's little incentive to build more refineries. So anyway, the answer to the question at the top is, are groceries 25% cheaper? No, they are not. They are about 30% higher than they were this time 6 years ago. They are 25% higher than they were 5 years ago, and they are 20% higher than they were 4 years ago. So consumers are feeling the pinch. The last thing I'll say about this before we move on is that wages still have not caught up to pre-pandemic levels according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. We are about 0.7% poorer on average than we were at the beginning of the failure administration in 2021. And if you might think, well, oh, that's less than 1%, that isn't a big deal, except it is. There's small drops like this over time that erode our living standards over decades. And it's the reason that houses are 6 times annual incomes instead of 2 or 3. The White House said there will soon be things to show for their work in office. And my question is, what? What is the things that you have done that actually makes our lives better, like ballooning our deficit, cutting people's health care and food benefits, raising prices on everything? Is that what we call success? Not at all. So I'm very confused here. I'd love to see what the White House comes up with. I don't think they're going to have much to show for it, but I figured it's worth a try. All right, moving on. As you are aware, the government shutdown is finally over, and the next one could happen at the end of January. But for now, the longest government shutdown in history will be the 43-day shutdown that just ended. So moderate Democrats, what did they do? How did this happen? Well, they essentially caved and agreed to vote with Republicans to reopen the government. Notably, Congress did not restore the Affordable Care Act subsidies that were at the heart of the shutdown. Instead, Republicans agreed to hold a vote sometime in the future, which means nothing, by the way. So Democrats really did not get that much out of this, but considering they are the minority party, there wasn't much that they could do anyway. If you're a Democrat, though, don't despair. There is something you can take to the bank, and that's Trump's approval rating has fallen like a stone. According to Nate Silver on the Silver Bulletin, he's a highly regarded pollster. Well, he doesn't do polling, but he aggregates polling, and it shows that his approval is about -13, and on Real Clear Politics it is about -12, which is quite low. Biden had the same approval rating at this point in his presidency, which ties back to what you see on the thumbnail about Trump is the new Biden. So, what are Democrats saying about their shutdown deal? Well, House Democrats were almost completely against it. The vote was 222 to 209, and only 6 Democrats voted for it, and 2 Republicans voted against it. Angus King is an independent senator from Maine. He's basically a Democrat. He's independent in name only. He's an INO. He said, I never thought that shutting down the government was leverage against the Republicans, and that was proven to be the case. But I think everybody felt we had to do something, and that was the only tool at the time that was the shutdown. The question is now, what do you do? It's been proven that we didn't achieve the desired result. So, all right, he's right. I mean, he is right. I agree with him. What did this compromise deal do? Well, it ends the SNAP battle, which are there going to be food stamps? People are going to get their food stamps back. People are not going to go hungry anymore. The deal also reinstated federal workers laid off during the shutdown. That's something Democrats wanted. And as I said earlier, it will extend government funding at 2025 era levels until January 30th, except for 3 departments, including which this will include agriculture, until September of 2026. If there was another shutdown in January, it would only be a partial government shutdown, and if it did shut down and it lasted a long time, which I don't think it's going to happen again. I don't think Democrats are going to try this stunt again. But if they did, then food stamps would not be cut. So the actual negotiating still has to be done because there is still a whole fiscal year left to cover for. But for now, the crisis is averted. And the good news is Congress didn't delay until Christmas, which means that the end of the year crunch that we saw last year and the year before and the year before that is not going to happen. All right, so we're going to move on. This is what I think everybody really cares about, and that's going to be the Epstein files. So I said over the summer I was not going to cover this anymore. I was hoping that would be the end of it, and I was hoping they would be released, there would be nothing in it, and then we could all move on. Except that is not the case. There is going to be a vote on the Epstein files. That will be this week. I'm assuming it'll be Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm not exactly sure. There is a thing called a discharge petition. Without a discharge petition, the Speaker decides what bills can come to the floor. And to bypass the Speaker, you have 2 options. You can either replace him or her, or you can do something called a discharge petition, which is what Democrats did. It needs 218 signatures, which is a majority of the 435 representatives, and it got the 218th signature last week because Mike Johnson finally swore in Representative-elect Alita Grivalga. As I said, there's a process to bypass the Speaker as long as you have 218 members to bring it to the floor, and that is what's going to happen here. This usually rarely succeeds, but here we are. It did succeed. And I'll say that every Democrat in the House voted to sign on, so it was 214. And then there were 4 Republicans that bucked leadership. It was Thomas Massie, who has personal gripe against Trump because for many different reasons. And then there's what I call the 3 witches of the Republican Party, which is Nancy Mace, Lauren Boebert, and Marjorie Taylor Greene. This vote will likely not change anything. It could show a rift in the Republican Party. I do expect mass defections from the Republicans to vote with the Democrats on this bill because nobody wants to be seen defending a you know what word I want to say. I don't think I'm allowed to say it. It would put on record who supported releasing this and who didn't. So in an article outlined in CNN, which I link below, the bill needs to ripen, which means 7 legislative days must pass before it comes to the floor. Then the Speaker has 2 legislative days to bring it onto the floor, which would bring us to early December. If Johnson was going to try to delay this as long as possible, instead he's going to bring to the floor next week, as I said. The interesting thing is, people have said, okay, what if this gets through the Senate, and then it gets to the President, and then he vetoes it? Yeah, then it would go back to the House of Representatives, and the veto would need to be overridden. When you need 290 to override a veto. So we'll have to wait and see. We're going to be looking, and we're going to be watching. Crucial 290 votes. 218, we're definitely going to get 218, because 218 wanted to vote on this. It's a matter of, are they going to get to 290? And I think that they might. We'll have to wait and see on this one. And we could see some abstentions. I'm thinking most Republicans are going to be inclined to support this. And now there is something called a pocket veto. I was reading that on Reddit. I had some friends that were asking me, all right, well, couldn't he pocket veto it? Well, that is a little bit more complicated. So a pocket veto is when the president vetoes a bill, then Congress goes out of session, and then because they're gone, they can't override it. So Congress actually almost never goes out of session. We say it goes out of session, but what it really does is it adjourns for 3 days, then it comes back, and then it does nothing, and then adjourns for 3 more days. So, what Congress could do, Trump can agree with Mike Johnson and John Thune. Those are the Senate and House leaders. They both happen to be Republicans. If they could get the bill to pass and then immediately go on recess and then adjourn, properly adjourn, not just for 3 days, but for however long, at least 10, and then Trump vetoes it, then the bill would die. The problem with that is it doesn't mean that we could just do this all over again. And if they did do that, then the questions would raise even more. Well, why is Trump doing this? Why are Republicans colluding with it? He must be hiding something. So, if anything, it would make it worse. And I would suggest the administration, no matter what, they should probably release all the documents. And we're not going to talk about what is in the documents right now because they did release some. And the reason is I'm not entirely allowed to talk about it on YouTube. And number two is I like to learn a little bit more about it before I give you information because this is so important. I don't want to give false information. As I said, the bill is this week. If it does take a crazy turn, I will update you midway through the week, as I sometimes do. So there is good and bad news for anyone who wants these files to be released. The good news is this keeps the issue on the agenda for at least another week and probably longer. It raises political pressure on Republicans to do something. The bad news is the chances of the files being released, I still would say, are quite low. So if anyone is looking for justice, I think that will remain elusive. And lastly, this kind of was papered over by the shutdown in the Epstein news, but it did break early last week, or maybe even the week before. It was the Supreme Court declined to hear a case on marriage equality, which many on the left were concerned about. A woman back in the early 2010s declined to give a gay couple a marriage license, and she was fined. She was fined quite a lot of money. And she was seen as one of the few people left in America hold with standing on the issue. And basically, standing means you have the authority to sue, and she's one of the few people left in this country who have the standing to sue, and she did, but the court rejected it, upholding their 2015 Obergefell ruling. And I think it's pretty safe to say that if a Supreme Court as conservative as this one declined to revisit the case, then it's not going to be reinstating the ban on gay marriage anytime soon. And I don't think the court is going to get any more conservative anytime soon. Right now, it's already 6-3. The only way it would get more conservative is if either Roberts retires or if one of the liberals do, and I don't think either of those things are going to happen in the next few years. And there's also a lot of people seem to forget about this. Same sex marriage is the law of the land, regardless of the Supreme Court. And as a reminder, President Biden in 2022 signed the Respect for Marriage Act, which requires all states to recognize marriage licenses from other states and says the federal government will honor such marriages. So even if the Supreme Court did strike it down and say Texas was like, well, we're not going to do gay marriage anymore, a gay couple could leave Texas, go to New Mexico, get married, that not only would Texas be required to recognize it, but so would the federal government. In short, same sex marriage was never really at risk. Overall, though, the fight for gay marriage and gay rights is a very long story, and it's worth its own episode at some point in the future, but I think for now, that's all you need to worry about. So that is it for now. Thanks for tuning into this episode, and I look forward to talking to you next week, or maybe later this week. We'll have to wait and see. And thank you for tuning in. Bye bye.